Hello, this is Jim Phillips. I'd like to add a little bit to the conversation on this PSA announcement in New York City about nuclear potential for a nuclear explosion. And I know that will stir the pot of emotions with a lot of people. But one of the advantages, it'll get people thinking, at least that's my hope, in a very positive way, and have a desire to learn and understand more than what they may know about these things right now. I applaud the courage that the mayor and the emergency management people had to put that up because that's something we don't hear a lot about. It's a good thing to get the conversation going, as I've said. Now, one of the things you need to understand is that um, the idea of doing that is to keep people from being totally blindsided when something happens. If you have just a hint of an idea about something may come, then you can possibly prevent it. And I know there's people working very hard to prevent that from happening. But also, if it does occur and people have somewhat of a plan going, they've learned a little bit, then they know how to respond, at least in a minimal way. It reduces the blind reaction of fear if they'll have those things in their mind. So again, this is good. Now, this is just the bare minimum of information that they gave out, but it's a place to start, and that's good. My desire is to add to the conversation a little bit and maybe clear up a few things, add a little bit more to it, get people thinking. I think that's important. The positive value in this is, well, as I said, begin the conversation, educate, get people to think about these things, and also recognizing that there's a huge amount of fear and terror over nuclear radiation, fallout, nuclear bombs, and all those things. It's been kind of worked into our society for generations. Now, in my classes that I teach, and I've been teaching for years about people getting prepared and dealing with emergencies and some of these difficult things, one of the things I like to do is help people understand what fear is. A definition of fear, what I believe is the best definition of fear that's ever existed. One word, just one word about what fear is. And fear is ignorance. You see, it really is impossible to fear anything for which you have true and complete knowledge. Now, I spend actually quite a bit of time in my classes, but I'd like you to think about that. I won't take that a lot of time right now because I want this to just be very short. Also, you can look at FEAR as an acronym, FEAR. That stands for false evidence appearing real. And there's a lot of false evidence about, nuclear explosions and radiation and everything. It's well, anyway, ignorance is just a real problem. Now, my background is here in 31 days exactly, I will be 75 years old. I was born shortly after World War II, growing up in the 50s and 60s in particular, going through, grade school, junior high, and those things. And this was during the really height of the Cold War and the Cuban Missile Crises and threat of total nuclear war and annihilation, all those things in school. When I was young in grade school, we had the duck and cover exercises. And as a matter of fact, if you go on YouTube and put in duck and cover, or let's see, it was oh, I forgot. Let's see. Tom the Turtle. No, I'll forget what his name is anyway. Oh, it was Bert the Turtle. That's what it is. Bert the Turtle. Go put Bert the Turtle duck and cover in YouTube, and you can watch some of these black and white cartoon presentations about duck and cover if an attack comes. Civil Defense Radio. On the dial, on the radio dial that you had to turn to get it up to, you lined up on where there was a little triangle on there at 640 and 1240 on the AM dial, and that's where you'd hear Conrad and those things. And so we had those kinds of things going on all the time to remind us. And to me, you can say, well, it stirred up some fear, but it also got people thinking about what would I do? How would I react? Well, better yet, how would you respond? Because it's really about learning to respond. Okay, when I was growing up, my father worked in the nuclear instrumentation field. He worked for a company, Everline Instrument Corporation, building radiation detection equipment. And then later on, when I was in the University of New Mexico, I worked in one of their branch offices while I was studying to be an electrical engineer for that same company. And so I was around radioactive things, around the safety and protocols, knowing what it would do and what it would not do. In 1968, I joined the Navy after going through my electronics school and my trainings there. Then I became a nuclear power plant reactor operator. And then after that, I became a reactor operator instructor. And so I was working around this all the time, radiation and reactors. And I was trained in RadCon, those types of things. And because of my security clearance at the time, I was able to get into files that most people couldn't get at. I love to study about nuclear accidents, about radiation spills, about reactor accidents, looking into those things and understanding what was going on from a physics standpoint and also from a health physics standpoint about radiation. Okay, so I have some background in that. And what you need to understand is that there is unreasonable fear due to ignorance about radiation and reactors and nuclear explosions. Now, I'm not making this, I don't want you to think this is a light issue or this is something you don't have to worry about. It's very serious, and it is something that you need to be aware of and thinking about, but doing it properly and not out of, out of balance. You see, respect for any kind of a issue comes through understanding. And that's what you need to do is get understanding. Now, radiation in this kind of an explosion they're talking about is not the big issue. Now, it's a big issue, but it's not the big issue, is what I'd like you to understand. I'm not blowing it off, but I also want to say that, because people hear about these things and 90% of the people will probably just zone out on this and can't even go there, can't get your head around it. And if you can't get your head around it, it's like, well, I don't know what to do, so I'll do nothing. So again, I'm going to say I applaud the mayor and the emergency management team for doing this, and they will take a lot of heat. So will I. I do when I talk about some of these things. It's either about being labeled as a fearmonger or not. For some people, it's not saying enough. It's not going far enough, not telling how terrible and what it is. It takes balance, and that's what I try to achieve in all of my classes. It's serious, but it's also something that you don't have to be afraid of if you understand and if you're prepared. So one of the other thoughts is, well, that's never happened before in this country, so it can't happen. It's easier to ignore things than to get involved in doing something about it, because then you have to spend time and money and get worried about. Don't do that. Do not blow this off. Take this seriously. Don't blow it out of proportion, but take it seriously. Now, just as a little background on some of these things, in my travels for teaching classes and some of the testing and things I did within the US and Canada only, I have over 2 million airline miles. That's a lot of flights. Some of them were, only a few hundred miles. Of course, some of them were cross country, but to get 2 million airline miles, you have to do a lot of takeoffs and landings. That means a lot of airline safety briefings. Now, what I know is people get on the plane, if they've done this once or twice, when they sit down and the stewardess is getting ready to tell about this stuff and what have you, they put their head down, get their paper magazines, ignore it, take off their shoes, and they zone out on it. I don't. I'm into safety. I'm into survival. I'm into preparedness. I pay attention. Now, I may have been on that same plane, but I'm never in the same seats. I'm looking around. Where's the exits? Those things. I'm listening, and all the time asking the question, what if? What if something happens? Am I prepared to act? Would I respond properly, rather than reacting in panic and fear? Would I respond? That's what's valuable about hearing these things. So it's awareness, and pre-planning reduces fear and panic and making mistakes. You see, when you're ignorant and you're afraid and you're reacting to things, then you make mistakes. Your hair's on fire and you're running around screaming, my hair's on fire, my hair's on fire. Never mind the fact that actually you've doused gasoline in your hair and tossed in a match, but it's still on fire. Okay, so what we want to do is avoid that. Now what? Well, take their PSA seriously. It's the barest minimum of information. I mean, it's just barely a little bit, but it is something. That's what's good. And it's got the conversation started with some people. Seek more information and from credible sources, not from your neighbor, down the street here, but get it from credible sources, and where you can learn about things. I'll give you some of those sources here in a little bit. Learn, ponder, be prepared, not scared is what it comes down to. And almost certainly, what I want you to understand, what they're talking about, we used to be worried about in the 60s and 70s about the global exchange of nuclear weapons. That's probably not going to happen. That's a very low probability. But there are individuals, groups, and rogue countries that hate us, want to destroy us, get us out of their way, and they want to use one of these terror weapons. And believe me, these nuclear weapons, these small ones that they can sometimes are called mistakenly suitcase bombs, but they're not all that big, and they can be taken, carried around, and planted. These are not big airburst, city busters. These are very small tactical weapons that are kind of surgical, big blast, but it still can be placed right where you want it. But it's a terror weapon. It's not going to kill millions of people in New York City, probably. What it's going to do is, yeah, there will be some thousands and then maybe tens of thousands injured potentially. And for those people, it's serious. I'm not making light of that, but I am simply saying it's not going to wipe out New York City or any other big city with these kinds of weapons. So, as I said, how this is being used, what it's being used for, is a weapon of terror. That's what it does because people are afraid of this, and it's not something you want to happen. So it's likely to be a small nuclear device. It'll be a ground burst, probably planted someplace if it occurs. I hope not. By the way, there are people working very hard to find these things to prevent it. And I have an individual that I know that I've met with. His job in years past has been to locate these devices on U.S. soil and off of U.S. soil and disarm them. And that's been going on. This is not a joke. This has been going on. So just understand the real probability of it, but it's not going to be the big city busters. Now the blast radius is quite small. It's big compared to a firecracker, but it's quite small compared to the 50 megaton city busters. So what it means is that if you're not kind of right there within a few dozen blocks of where it goes off, or within in a mile radius, or you're outside of a 2 mile radius, or what have you, the effects will be limited to you. Again, not making light of this. It's very serious where it does occur, but if you're out of that blast radius, it's going to be okay. It's easy to deal with. So that's the kind of blast that they're talking about. Now let's take a look at the New York City points that they made, and I just want to add a little bit to this. Then I'm certainly you've watched that little video. It's a minute and a half long, but they got a lot of useful information in there, but still it's minimum, bare minimum. So let's expand on that. First off, number one of the three is get inside. Absolutely everything they said is just really, really true. But you do need to recognize if you're out in the outskirts of town and something went off, down there in Battery Park or right there in Manhattan or what have you, and you're, 3 or 4 miles away, you still need to be getting inside, but you're not going to have to be freaked out about that. So yes to everything that they said. Now, this is where some additional information is needed when they talk about number two, which is stay inside. Now, when you get inside, you're going to shut the doors and windows. What is that about? Well, that's about radioactive particulates maybe blown up into the air, and then it'll come down in what we call fallout. It's dust and different things that has been irradiated by that blast, made radioactive. Most of the radiation will decay off fairly quickly within a couple of weeks. You don't want any of that dust on you. Now, here again, if you're 3 miles away upwind, you're probably not going to get any of it on you. If you're within 2 miles of it and you're downwind of the way the wind blows, you're going to get some dust over you. That's a problem. That's what you don't want coming into the building, the house where you're at. So you close the windows and doors and you stay in there. Now, the other thing is that, as I mentioned just very briefly, when you get inside, you go to the middle of the building or go to the basement. Basements are a good place to be. But if you don't have a basement, you go right to the center of the building as much as you can. What's that about? Well, that's about shielding from the radiation that would be coming into the building. And there's two things that stop it. One is distance. Think of a light bulb. You have this, or a candle. You have a candle and it's right in front of your eyes. It's really bright across the room. And it's not so bright across the street. You can see it, but it's not very bright. Well, the radiation, the gamma particles are like that. The further away you are from it, they're more spread out. And so there won't be as many of them impacting you. So distance helps. And then the other thing is the mass of material that's going to be stopping the radiation. So you want as much material as you can get. Concrete is really good for that, and brick and things like that, and earth. That's why basements are really good if you can get down in a basement, because the walls, it certainly won't be coming in that way. You'll get some coming from above, but not as much. So mass and distance, what you're looking for, heavy, dense materials to get in the way of where those radioactive beams would be coming in. Now, if you were outside, here's one where it goes back to what I said earlier. If you were outside, get in and take your clothes off. Hey, if you're 3 miles away, upwind from this, it just went off. You don't have to come inside and take your clothes off. Go inside, yes, but you don't have to strip down because there's nothing on you. So you just think about these things a little bit, understand what's going on here. If you're closer to it and where there may have been some dust pulled up into the air that's been irradiated and it's falling down, then you need to really take your clothes off because those particles are going to be trapped in the clothing and in your hair. So you remove the clothing and you want to shower. Where do you take the clothing off? Think about this. You don't walk into your bedroom with this dusty clothes that's going to be irradiating things and take it off in your bedroom because now it's in there. So you want to do it in a hallway, in a vestibule, in a garage, or someplace where you can take it off, not bring it into your living quarters. Bag up that clothing so you can keep it together, and then don't bring that clothing in and put it in the laundry room. You want to leave it outside because, well, you would bring that hot stuff in there. And then shower off with soap and water to get where there may be any of this stuff sticking to your skin or in your hair. Shower very well, get it down the drain. So just understand that again, if you're not any place around where the dust is going to get on you, then don't be so worried about that. But if you have any doubt, well, go ahead and do this. It's a safety precaution. Now, don't be going outside. You're going to be staying in. So while you're staying in, if somebody else comes, a family member, somebody that you want to come in, they have to go through that same procedure where they take off the clothes, where they bag them up, and then get inside and shower off and get some other clothing on. So consider that as just some of the precautions that are really important, but don't everybody run inside and get naked just because it went off 5 miles away. Okay. I don't mean to be cynical about that. Just understand what the issue is. Now, the other one here, which is number 3, is stay tuned. Follow media, get information, not rumors, not what somebody ran down the street yelling or what have you. You want to get as good information as you get: radio, TV, text, internet, ham, GMRS, walkie-talkie type of things. But understand that the voice communication via cell phone is likely to go away because those cell towers in an emergency, they're going to be shut down. Everybody trying to call them. Did you see what happened? Are you okay? They'll just completely saturate the system. So it's either going to be shut down or it's just going to be overloaded so it won't work. But very often, text messages can still be sent. And some of these municipalities may be, if you've registered for it and have your phone number, they may be sending text messages. So watch for that. Well, you want to have multiple sources of your internet and ham and radio and TV and everything on as many as you can. And you would like to have a battery powered radios because the power is going to be off for some people, or it may be off for a very large area. So something that is battery powered that you can listen to and get information. Again, cell phones probably will not be working as far as voice. Maybe getting text will in fact be working. See, the issue is that with this explosion that occurs, it'll be damaging equipment. And one of the other things that occurs, all nuclear detonations, whether it's high up in space or on the ground, send out an electromagnetic pulse. And right around where this detonation has occurred, there's going to be this EMP pulse that's going to go into the power lines and in the telephone lines that are there, any copper wires. It's going to pick it up and it'll put it out to some of the other equipment, and it may burn out transformers and burn out generation facilities. So the power is likely to be off over some area, and it might be extended. So here again, having battery powered equipment is what you want. Internet's probably going to be on. So understand that. And the reason I want to say that is, say, well, that's sounding a little worse than what they were saying. What I believe is if people understand what the truth is really. In other words, the radios aren't working, can't get anything communicate. No, the Martians haven't landed. It just means that, yeah, in the area where you are, equipment has been damaged and it's going to be a while before it comes back. That's normal for something like this to occur. If you're out of that blast area far enough away, then you still have electricity. Great. Then enjoy it. So those are some of the things you need to know and understand. Now, be aware, make provisions. Don't scare about this stuff. Yes, it's serious, but don't freak out. You must stay inside, which means, well, there's going to be no shopping. You're not going to be, well, I need to go get some groceries, so we'll go down to the store. No, you're not. Well, you shouldn't. You don't want to go down there anyway. It could be the people that haven't got the message. They're out there mobbing everything. They're trying to grab up everything they can find. Remember the toilet paper thing a year and a half ago? Oh, my goodness. You went in the stores and people were loading up their shopping carts, not with what they needed for that day or for the next week. They were stripping the shelves of anything that they could get their hands on simply because it was there before somebody else got it. That's called hoarding, by the way. That's not what you do. You store things ahead of time, allow the system to adjust, but we were never short of toilet paper, actually. It's just the fact that people were grabbing it before somebody else did. So with the power out over large areas, it's going to mean that probably no refrigeration if you're in that area. So eat your perishable foods first, and save your non-perishable things that are canned for later on. And it would be a good idea, of course, to have things ahead. That's one of the things you should be doing since you're aware of the possibility. Then just stock up on some extra things. You're going to use it anyway. Buy the things you're going to use. Just have more of it in there so that you can rotate through it and use it and keep that larger store going all the time. Water is likely to run out for some people. How much of an area? I don't know. It depends on the system, what's been damaged on that. But just realize after a little while, if your water's still running, then gather up some water, fill all the jugs you can find and what have you, so you'll have drinking water. But the water will go out for some areas in there. And if it does, well, that's just a normal symptom. You're going to have to stay put. So be ready to take care of yourself. But that raises a real problem you need to be thinking about. I do classes on this, but this is not the class. You can go to my website and get them. But that means that white porcelain throne that you perch upon periodically, it's not going to have any water to flush it. Now you got to think about what are you going to do with the waste that you're producing and also with your garbage and refuge and those things because nobody's going to be picking it up. Think ahead, be prepared with things and learn what you can be doing so that it's not going to be such a terrible event. Now, the banks will be closed in your area, maybe over a large area. If we're talking New York City, which is where the stock market is and where some of the banking centers are and what have you, we can have banks closed down all across the country. So things may reach out further than there. I'm out here in Utah, and I might have some things shut down on me. Well, that's just a normal symptom of what's going to happen. The markets will be stripped of food in a hurry. So you want to have food on hand. Already mentioned that one. Radioactive fallout, there'll be some for some people. And you'll want to study where that will be. There will be a book I'll show you here in just a minute where you want to get that and study it a little bit so that you, again, get information, get correct information so you don't freak out about this stuff because you're ignorant and you're afraid you're going to melt your eyeballs just because one went off 20 miles away from you. Okay, here's the big fallout. We think about the radioactive fallout, that dust that got blown up into the air. But here's another fallout it's huge, and that is the economic fallout, which I've already related to. The banks will be closed. You'd like to have cash on hand, so you ought to have some around. The banks are likely to be closed for a while. Credit cards may not be working. And then that really will cause people to freak out because they don't have access to their money and things like that. So now they're all worried about that. It's just what's going to happen for a while, ride through it. But here is the biggest fallout of all. This is bigger than the radioactive. This is bigger than the economic fallout. They all feed into this, and that is the emotional fallout. That's the biggest threat of all. When we have this financial decline and things shutting down and what have you, and then people that can't, the ATMs aren't working, their credit card doesn't work, they didn't have any cash, and they're going to be mad. What it is, they're afraid and they don't know what to do about it, so they're mad. So they want to riot. They want to throw rocks and bottles and go out there and burn down City Hall. Like that's going to help. We see that happening after minor events. This is going to be more major. So that's the big one. It's another reason you don't want to be outside because you get swept up in some of that stuff and it can be dangerous. Okay. One of the other things that's going to be a real problem will be the lack of reliable communications. Cell phones, internet, radio, TV, these things may be off. There's not going to be a newspaper delivered or what have you. So don't fall prey to the rumors that the Russians have landed, the Chinese are knocking at our doors and what have you. So you want to do anything you can to get good information, credible information. That's where the ham radios, you don't have to be a ham to broadcast, but if you have a ham radio that can receive, and then you can be listening to some of these faraway stations, get good information as best as you can. And then, of course, as you're getting trained and thinking about these things, be making provisions for the future. Now, so there are some things you can be thinking about. First off, people will say, well, what I want, Jim, just give me the list. Give me the list of all the things I need to buy. And I want to know what I need to buy, and I'll go buy all those things. Well, here's my point. And people ask me that in my classes. And what I've told them for years is, if I just give you the list of what to buy, when things get really, really tough, you'll probably just give up and die because you don't know what to do and you haven't learned about some things that you need to learn, haven't developed some skills. What you want to do is get yourself educated in a number of areas so you'll know how to respond. Here's one of the places you can go. Now you can go to my website, which is jimsway.com. And there's a lot of things that you will find there. I have a newsletter you can register for, the Provident Living Times. I do free classes Wednesday nights and Saturday mornings over the internet, Zoom classes, various topics. A lot of those things, I then put them on my website in a library so that you can go and study them. And there's dozens of classes in my library right now. You'll want to go look at those. I'm also on YouTube, and I have some Facebook things that I've been doing. I'll be doing more. Then, of course, it's on YouTube. And one of the things on YouTube, I just put up just recently a video that was about who is Jim Phillips? What does he stand for? I'd recommend you watch that because it fits right into this topic right here about, some really tough things that could occur, but how you need to stay calm in the midst of these things. In my library, there's a set of classes. It was 9 of them that I did on the library, which is a critical factor for your survival. Critical books you need to have. And so it's in 9 parts because there's quite a number of books. And the first, 2 or 3 of these would be the most important ones for you to get and study and learn so that you'll get your attitude and your outlook straight. Here's another source of information. There's a lot of good ones out there. The Provident Prepper. These are some people I know, and they have a YouTube channel. There's a lot of videos on there that you can look at, give you some hints and ideas and things, and they do everything in a very positive way. So I'd recommend that you go follow some of what they're doing. Here's the book. Now, when you read the title on this book, you say Nuclear War Survival Skills. Oh, crap. I don't want anything to do with nuclear war. Now, it's the nuclear war that scares people away, and there are lots of survival skills in it. But what I recommend you get this book for is so that you'll understand what nuclear blasts are about, and then especially it's the radiation section in there that people are so freaked out about this because there's really everything you need to know about radiation and how to deal with it, and so that you can calm down and understand this is all very survivable. Get that book. I would highly recommend it. You probably won't put it out on your coffee table because your neighbors will think you're nuts or what have you. But anyway, this is a good book to help get you educated. You can buy them online, a printed copy for about $20. 300 pages. You can get do a browser search for it. You can find it as a PDF download. But what you want is a hard copy because the digital copy you probably can't get at it when you want it. So, download it and print it if you want to do that. Frankly, it's cheaper to buy a printed one. And then online, you can find some of these used for between $5 and $15. So there's really no excuse for not having that book and what it will help you learn. You could also join the another organization right here. This is the American Civil Defense Association, TACDA, at www.tacda.org. Join them. They have a lot of articles on this. There's back issues of the Civil Defense Journal, and you'll want to read some of them in there. And there's all kinds of topics in there, but if you're interested in radiation and blast effects, you'll find it there. I didn't want this to be a real long dissertation, so I'm going to close out here pretty quick because I could spend an hour on each one of these topics that we've had about the radiation, about blasts and all those things, but this is not the class for that. This is to get you thinking. So here's one thing. The truth about life is very simple. The truth about life is this. There is no doubt that tomorrow will come, and there's no dispute that things happen. But how you're prepared to meet tomorrow will make all the difference in the world. If you're prepared for the worst, then no matter what happens, it will be an adventure. And you see, I believe that life should be an adventure rather than a frightening stuff that you have to worry about. But that means you need to be educated so you're ready to deal with it and you're prepared. So if you're prepared for the worst. Now, I look at things from a worst case scenario. Why? Because I'm in the gloom and doom. The heck? I'm into understanding what could happen and I want to be ready to deal with it. So it'll be an adventure. Now, there's a law that I consider to be the most fundamental law of all of the principles that I teach about. It's called the law of provident living. It has 4 parts to it. And I've really been talking around about this. It is spiritual, attitude, knowledge, and then stuff, material things. And it's in that order. Take care of your spiritual life first. And then it's about your attitude because that'll help you get through when things are really, really bad. And if you lose your attitude, you're likely to lose your life. And then it's knowledge, and that's what I've been focusing on. How do you get the attitude that says I can make it? It's really about having the spiritual foundation and then getting knowledge about how and why things work, because then you know, like, hey, I can deal with this. I know what to do. And then you'll also be getting some of the right stuff that you will need. Now, I teach classes in a whole bunch of areas here. You may want to look them up on my website. There are 9 areas that I talk about foundation, which is about attitude and outlook and fear and all those things you need to understand. Clothing is high on the list because in the dead of winter, when it's cold and blowing and what have you, you can be hurt in a hurry. Next is water. So one of the things you already mentioned in here, water is extremely important because after a day or so of no water, nothing to drink, you're going to be hurt, is what it comes down to. So water is critically important. And then sanitation, already talked a little bit about that because if you get the disease cycle going, doesn't matter if you have food and all the other things here. If you've got cholera and diarrhea and there's nobody to help you, this could turn deadly in a hurry. And then there's, of course, nutrition and shelter, wellness tools and supplies. Learn about those on my website. Now, here's another thing to consider. It's a way of thinking. So, is the thing I've been talking about in this PSA, is this just a whole bunch of negative gloom and doom talk and fear mongering and what have you? Or can you say without reservation that this is what provident living is all about, understanding what the risks are and then making provisions for those things? Now, that's why I look at it, because that's exactly what this is. And what this comes down to, here's the thought. By getting educated and prepared in these areas, then you can put yourself in a position where you can be wrong about all your preparations, all the things I've been doing for the past, 50 years or what have you. I hope I'm wrong. I want to be wrong. I want nothing to happen. So I'm in a position where I can afford to be wrong. If you say that's impossible, it'll never happen, not here, we're too strong, whatever it is, and that, then you have to be right. You cannot afford to be wrong. I can afford to be wrong. Put yourself in a position where you can afford to be wrong. Here's another thought for you, and that is this: how you feel about your future really is in your hands. It's your choice to determine how you want to prepare for it and be ready to deal with it. You will either choose to live providently, making provisions, being ready, getting educated, or you will, by default, have chosen to become a victim when something happens. That's the bottom line. I don't like victimhood because victims have a tough time, and if nobody comes along to rescue them, they may not make it. So here's one more little thought in this area. Will you make provisions? Will you prepare? Will you be ready? Well, the choice is yours. And really, it is by making proper provisions in all areas of your life that you can face the future with hope and with confidence. My mission has been for years and will continue to be to reach and teach as many people as possible about some of these key aspects of living providently, making provisions, being prepared. That's what it's about. So that, it's an adventure rather than, oh my heck, now what am I going to do? Now, my website, jimsway.com, you can register for the newsletter there, the Provident Living Times. And what that brings to you, which is most important right now, is I do free classes over the internet on Zoom, Wednesday nights and on Saturday mornings. I'm there, and you come join those classes, bring your questions, listen to what we teach, and enjoy it is what I would hope that you would do. I'm also, of course, on YouTube, where I have a channel there, the Jim's Way channel. Do some things on Facebook and a few other areas. But on my website, there's a whole bunch of free classes. These are full classes. Some of them are, an hour or 2 hours long. Some of them are shorter than that. And I don't know how many I have up there. There's quite a few right now. Also, there's some, classes on YouTube. There's some older ones there. I'm just tuning those things up now on YouTube. So go there. There's some things you can download and study that you would like to do. And then I have for members only, I have a little members library where you can join, and it's very inexpensive. You can join and quit anytime you want, $5.99 a month. That gives you some very exclusive classes that go very deeply into water, the liquid of life. Sanitation, being ready to deal with that one. There are no flush toilets. What are you going to do? How serious is that? Be ready. About clothing and winter clothing and being prepared to live with no fire, no shelter if you want to. Most people don't want to do that, but you can certainly learn how to do it. I recommend that you go to my website, to other websites, to YouTube, and collect good, credible information. I like to take mine down to principal level to teach as deeply as I can so that you'll understand how and why things work, because the ability to survive means that you have adapted. You have to adapt to the situation, whether it be big blast, no electricity, no water, whatever it is. If you can adapt to those situations because you're prepared mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, you'll survive. May you have the best of life is my hope for you, the reason for doing this. You can send me questions that you may have through my website. Come join the classes that I do. I hope this information will help you get, ready for this, and don't be afraid of it. What's going to happen is going to happen. You can't stop it, but what you can do is be ready to respond in a very positive way, in a very less than fearful, panicked way is what you want to do. So get some of this education, some of this learning, come to my classes, go to other people's classes, get yourself ready to deal with whatever comes and make it an adventure. That would be my hope for each and every one of you. Have yourself a good day. Talk to you again. Bye now.